Well, shooters and reloaders and Three Circles passengers and members, it's Fortune Cookie 45 LC coming to you from the hot lead zone. And you know, what happened was Dick Tickles went ahead and encouraged me to get one of these Lee app presses because he saw me doing some of my deep reserve brass and running them through the single stage press to deprime and resize them before wet tumbling. And he said, you got to get one of these Lee amp presses because it makes your work go by so much quicker. And so I went ahead and got one of these from Midway USA, set it up, wasn't hard to set up, and now I'm starting to do some 45 ACP. Now this brass here happens to be brass that has been dry tumbled in media many years ago. I put this brass away into my deep reserves. So I've got a bunch of these in these containers full of 45 ACP brass. Grabbed hold of one of those to go ahead and process these. And I want to show you that you see the little bits of tumble media, the dry media that's still in here. So that's how you know this has been dry tumbled in media. Well, after I go through and deprime and resize these, and then I put it through the wet tumbler, you're going to see how much more dirt and crud is going to be cleaned out of these cases by doing wet tumbling. A strictly superior way of processing and polishing, cleaning our brass, wet tumbling. Well, let's say hi to some new members, and there's Doug up there in Redding, California. Hello to Doug. And then there's David J. Talley, and also Jared H. 3333, and also a hello to Charlie Fro up there in Williams, California, where I used to do some squirrel shooting, ground squirrel hunting, varmint shooting. So this here is just a start because that container is still pretty full. But here's what the app press can do for us when it comes to depriming and resizing our brass. Now you see what happens is that a case is pushed underneath the die, and then we go ahead and resize that, and then another case comes through and we go ahead and resize that. So we resize one case with every stroke of the press, and it can go pretty fast. As fast as you can go ahead and pull that. As you see. Now what enables the speed of the app press is that the empty casings are in this tube, and they are gravity fed into the press through this tube and that slider. So as you see, we go ahead and run the press, and you see how the dead primers fall into that jar underneath, and we keep on processing this brass as it goes through, and the cases slide out through the one-way shell holder, as you see. And so it is faster than handling all the cases into a single stage press by hand. By the way, what helps run the cases through this tube is to use a regular cleaning rod like this one here and put it into the top of the tube like this to give more weight to the column of cases, as you see. And that helps the feeding of the cases in the event that you don't have a good feed of that. So doing the wet tumbling actually gets rid of all that dustiness. You have completely dust-free brass after doing wet tumbling. And you won't have that with dry tumbling. So what good is the app press if you've got to manually load these tubes? Well, Lee actually took care of that, so let me show you what we as reloaders can do we can actually get the Lee 4-tube rotating system that allows you to get one tube and then go ahead and go to the next tube. When one tube is empty, you just rotate to the next tube and you're back in business. You can do a lot of cases that way. Plus, there's a collator on top that you dump brass into, shake it, and it fills the tubes for you. And that is superior. That makes this press really sing. So here's the collator in a way that you would have it all ready to go. And notice the dirt that's in there. That's from the 45 ACP project we just did. All that dry tumbling still has a lot of dirt in there. Well, anyway, what we normally do is dump a lot of brass inside of the collator and then start shaking it. But if you put too much brass in there, the problem is the brass interferes with the free movement of the brass into those 4 orifices. So when you shake it, the best way is to have about 1 layer of brass in there, and if you do that, the collator works very well. So a good way to do it is take your jug and pour the brass into the collator as you're shaking so that there's never more than 1 layer of brass at a time. And if you do it that way, the 4 tubes fill very, very quickly. If you don't do it that way, you gotta shake a while and nothing's getting in there. So that's a good way to run the collator. Well, if you don't have the rotating Lee 4-tube system, then you gotta go 1 tube at a time. Well, let me show you what you can do. This happens to be that collator we're talking about with the 4 tubes. And all we've got to do is mount this on the press and we're in business. But my problem is that I don't have the 45 caliber adapter, so I can't run my 45 ACP brass, but I can do it with a single tube. But I don't have the one for the multiple 4-tube system, so I've got to get that. Well, you can, in the meantime, make this system still work for you. And here's how you do it. So we go ahead and put the brass into the collator, and you see how just shaking that, those brass casings just flow right into those tubes. We'll just put a few more of them in there. Now, all those tubes now are filled with 45 caliber MT casings. Now, you might have noticed I just stick that mounting bolt through a accessory hole in my bench top. We all have some of those renegade holes in the bench top. So this works real well. Now we just take the collator off. We take the collator off, and then we dismount the tubes one at a time. As you see, take the tubes, and these can be singly fed into our app press. And this is much better than loading the tubes by hand. Like that. So we just take these tubes over to our app press, as you see. So there are the tubes ready to go into the app press. We just take our finger to stop the fall of the brass until it's into the press itself. And this allows us to go ahead and process these cases in a very nice manner. As you see. Now, when one tube is empty, we simply take the empty tube off and then put a full tube there, and we're in business. Keep repeating all of this until the whole container is run through. Yes, the Lee app press is really something of a marvel. Now, doing the resizing before the wet tumbling actually saves us a little bit of time, because we don't have to run the case through to resize it after the wet tumbling. This is a big advantage. Plus, we'll have our best finished brass for finishing our reloading projects by doing it this way. So I'd like to thank Justin for recommending this press to me and getting me to try it, because it really is great. So you see, now we got 4 more tubes emptied. So if you only shoot 50 rounds a week or 50 rounds at a time, and you don't run a progressive loader but rather use a single stage press only, you don't really need the app press. But if you do a lot of shooting and competition and this kind of thing, and run a Dillon or other progressive reloading press, the app press is excellent for you. So here's something important, and if you don't read the instructions, and a lot of us don't, you want to change the shell holder. It's a through and through shell holder. You think that you're going to have to take this screw out to change the shell holder, but no, Lee's got us all covered on that. There's actually a reverse breech lock, so you just take it out like this, and then the shell holder simply slips right out like that. How great is that? Now notice this bottle. Look at all those dead primers in there. Gives you an idea of how much brass we can go ahead and process using the Lee app press. It's really wonderful for a lot of brass to be run through. This bottle is amazing in that it captures all the dirt. The press stays nice and clean for us. This is another example of Lee innovation in the reloading industry, and there's no other press like this that other manufacturers make. Lee's got a real good press here, and it's very solid, very rugged, and the cost is amazing in that it's around $80 for this press, $80 to $90. Now, some might not like some of the plastic parts in this press, but the plastic parts are actually very reliable, and if they need replacement, they're easy to replace. That makes this press actually very functional. So now let's go ahead and run this dry, cleaned brass through the wet tumble, and you'll be able to see how much better job the wet tumble will do. Okay, so no water on the floor after doing the Frankfurt Arsenal rotary tumbler tumbling because of the nice extractor that we have. So let's go ahead now and take this off, open it up. Okay, let's see how dirty this water is. Now, remember, this has been dry tumbled already, this brass. And now we've wet tumbled it to see what the dry tumbling missed. Don't know if you can tell, but that water is filthy. Absolutely filthy. So it's pretty obvious to me that wet tumbling does a lot better job in getting rid of all of the stuff inside and out, all the contaminants, much more better job of doing that than the dry tumbling media. Well, I think even in this bad light, you can tell that that brass just looks great. Give you a close-up. You can see inside some of those, and that's where a lot of that dirty water came from, is the insides of the cases were not cleaned anywhere near as well with the dry tumbling as with the wet tumbling. So one of these was wet tumbled, the other was dry tumbled. One was wet tumbled and the other was dry tumbled. So there's all that brass all dried now. And I can tell by the head stamps that this brass was what I used during the times I was shooting IPSC and also steel. Because there are some that have military head stamps that I had to actually take the crimps out of these. So can you make out that these are WCC, that's Winchester, military, and one is 1964, another one's 1962. And these have been reloaded so many times that the head stamps are almost smooth. And you see all the little nicks from the .45 caliber ACP 1911 pistol when it extracted, and the extractor marks and all of those kind of things in these cases. I remember taking the crimps out of these. Nice clean primer pockets. Nice wet tumbled brass. And clean on the inside as well. We make that out. So I think the case is closed as to the goodness of wet tumbling over the dry. Look at those insides. So take care, Fortune Cookie 45 LC. See you in the next video. Bye for now.